Alright, so now that I know that structure, I'm gonna actually input that information into Python so that I can automatically navigate through this whole website. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a new variable to store my URL, but now I'm gonna make it more dynamic by creating some parameters directly within Python. So I'm going to say base URL and type in our old address. And what I'm going to do here is type in the parts that are static. So these C2s were always there. And here I'm going to use curly braces to create some variables within my string. This is a pretty powerful way. Instead of always using the plus sign to concatenate the string, I can just write the string continuously, but throw in these curly braces to specify variables that I can replace easily later on. You can see that the numbers in the curly braces are going up one integer at a time, starting at 0. And this is a standard format for this kind of string. Okay, so that's going to be my base URL. And now just to test this, I'm going to reformat the string to coordinate with the range I specified here, 200 to 500. Okay, so what I'm going to do is say new URL equals base URL. And now to replace these parameters with values, I use the format function. And inside the parentheses, I input the values that I want each of these 3 parameters to take. So here I'll say 200 for my first number, 500 for my second number, and this is the page number. For now, I just want to go to the first page, so 1. And just to test that, I'm going to comment out some of the other calls here. Alright, and now I'm just going to run this, only these 2 lines of code to test if that new URL is working. And I'm going to print the new URL. So once we have this new way of working with URLs, I want to actually loop through all of the pages in that range. So the first thing I need to do is within this smaller range, figure out how many listings we're working with. Okay, so we're going to redo some of our work from up here and basically use Beautifulsoup to parse through that first page and find out how many listings are in the page, in the range. Okay, so from here I'm going to take this fetch, get the page. I need to import Beautifulsoup. I'll throw that up here. Here I'm going to use Beautifulsoup to decode the page into a structure. And then I'm going to use this bit of code to get the number of listings in that range. Okay, so here's my code. I'll run this again. Before I do, I need to change this to new URL and make sure your capitalization is correct. And actually, my format was a little bit messed up. There should be no slash in there, so it should be just continuous there. So if I run this code, I see my URL here, and this is the total number of listings in the range. Okay, so now once I have that number of listings, I need to do a bit of math like we did with the Weibo example to actually figure out how many pages of listings I have based on the number of listings per page. So I'm going to import the math library as before, and I know that the listings per page is 36. So now I'm going to calculate the number of pages based on that number, and what I'm going to do is take the number of items that I found up here and divide that by the listings per page. But just like before, we need to do a few things to make sure that math goes the way we expect. First, we need to convert both of these to floats. So that gives us a decimal output. And then we use the math.ceiling function, C-E-I-L, to round that up, to force it to round up, even if it wants to round it down. So we capture all the pages. And then finally, we convert that back to an integer to get a whole number that we can iterate over in a loop. Okay? Make sure your variable names line up. So if you're confused by that math, look over the Weibo tutorial. It's the same exact type of thing. And now we'll just print out number of pages, and then we will cast this back to a string so we can concatenate it to our string here and run that. So now we have number of pages 55. Okay, so once we have the number of pages, we're ready to actually automate this process and loop over a set number of pages and get all the information from this whole range. In this case, we're going to loop over 55 pages, which has all of these listings. Okay, so to do a loop, I'm just going to keep adding down to here. This isn't the most efficient structure. You'll find a reworked, kind of optimized version of this code on the GitHub as the final Sofan script. I'm going to keep adding out so we can see this kind of development of ideas happening. So I'm going to start my loop to loop over all these pages. Let's say for I in range num pages. So this is similar to what we did with Weibo. So num pages represents the number of pages in the range. And in this loop, I will take on every value from 0 to this number of pages, which will allow us to feed into this dynamic URL. So now we're going to still use our base URL. This has all the kind of parameters we need to generate our URLs. I'm just going to take this new URL. So this will create a new URL in every instance of the loop. In the format, I'm going to keep these as constant. We just want to stick with this range, but this will now be dynamic. And here I'm going to use, instead of 1, I'm going to use I plus 1. So I starts at 0 and will end at num pages minus 1. So I want to add 1 to it, so it starts at 1 and ends at that actual number of pages. And we can actually test this now. I'm just going to put in a print new URL statement, hit run. And you see we just get a long list of 55 addresses that with each URL dynamically renamed to give us the range we want. And we can actually also test this by putting this into our address bar. And here you can see we have the same range still, but now we're on page 52 of this range. Here's our listings. Okay, so once we have these addresses being generated, I'm just going to reuse some of the code from above. So this code that takes the page, downloads it, and converts it into a Beautifulsoup object, we can just put down here. This will now convert every web page. And after I've converted every page, I just want to take some of this code from up here, which figures out how many listings are on that page and then loops through each of those listings to get the name and the price of the house. This is exactly what we had from the step before. And as I paste this into this loop, I want to make sure to select everything and tab over so everything now lines up. So I just selected everything and hit tab. So everything now lines up with that loop and will happen every time the loop runs. So you can see what happens here. I get all the information from the page. I figure out how many listings are on that page. And then I loop through all those listings, extracting the name and the price. So if I hit run now, it's going to start to do my loop. And see now it's going page by page, outputting all the houses and all the prices in that range.